This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Sean Cole, but the real star of today's show is the Oktane Designs SEQ Magnetic Sequential Shifter for sim racing. This is a USB standalone shifter that can be added to any sim racing setup for added realism and in some cases, even better shifting. The SEQ shifter is currently on sale for only $249, available from OktaneDesigns.com, and it is mostly made of metal. It is a large shifter with a robust design, and it looks like it can handle some seriously aggressive shifts with no problem. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at the SEQ shifter and talk about some of its features, starting off with the main frame of the SEQ shifter. It is made of 6061 grade aluminum that measures in at a very thick 4.7 millimeters and has a polished finish to it. That main frame also provides the mounting plate on the bottom that is easily mounted to T-slot type rigs. The mounting is done via 2 slots or a hole on the front and back edge of the shifter. Extending up from the lower frame are the upright arms of the shifter that are also made of 6061 aluminum and are very beefy or overbuilt. On one side of the shifter is the Oktane Designs logo, laser etched into the metal, and on the opposite side, a very cool Simpit logo for me. The hardware that bolts the entire sandwich design together are very prominent in their black color, giving the assembly a little bit of an industrial look. Between the two uprights, at the bottom, is the small electronics box that extends out of the lower frame and is colored in black as well. Also between the uprights is the long shifter arm that is made out of some sort of 3D printed material and is also black in color. Then at the top, the rounded shifter knob in black as well. The overall measurements of the shifter are 10 3/4 or 273 millimeters tall by 5 inches or 127 millimeters long by 2 3/4 or 70 millimeters wide. That makes it a relatively small shifter when it comes to installation, but a rather tall shifter when it comes down to function. Being a little bit overbuilt, it does weigh in at a monstrous 910 grams. Also included with the shifter is an electronics box, a 5-foot USB cable, a 3-foot RJ12 cable, and some mounting hardware, along with some adjustment tools. When it comes to the mounting of the SEQ shifter, it's pretty easy as well. It's pretty well thought out, and first things being that it is built to just go right onto most T-slot or 80/20 profile style rigs. You've got the 2 holes in the middle at the profile. They supply the bolt along with the little piece, the nut that goes into the profile slots, and it's that easy. For other rigs, it'll come down to, if it's a wood or a DIY rig, you can just screw 4 bolts, 4 screws right through it, drill holes and do 4 bolts. It's pretty much going to be that easy as long as those dimensions work for you. In my case, it would be mounted to the super beefy R-seat shifter mount that has a lot of random holes and slots in it. I found a spot on the plate that allowed for 3 bolts to be used in the perfect spot for me. 3 bolts later, it was firmly mounted. The mounting slots are about 4.5 inches or 114 millimeters apart, and that gives you about 1.7 inches or 43.5 millimeters of width to work with. Once mounted, the RJ12 cable plugs into the black box on the front side of the shifter, and then that cable plugs into the supplied electronics box, and then a USB printer style cable plugs into that box and then into your computer. Now, before we move on to the driving aspects of the shifter, one of the great features of the Oktane Designs SEQ shifter is its adjustability. Not all shifters have adjustability built in, but this one sure does. You can adjust the tension and the throw distance of the shifter, and it's actually done fairly easily. Starting with the tension, you have 3 holes at the top here. And at the top mounted position, you have the highest amount of tension to engage the shifter. The next position down reduces that by almost a half, and then that final one almost takes it down to the level where it's a third. You just remove that top black bolt, you remove the bushings from the shifter arm, you install the bushings into the lower set of holes, and reinstall the black bolt, and it's that easy to make changes to the tension the release tension of the shifter. As I mentioned, you can also adjust the throw distance of the shifter. This is a short throw, almost a speed shifter in its default position. But by moving these bolts inward, you can actually limit the travel of the shifter by a little bit more, making an even quicker or shorter distance between shifts. And in the end, I did find that I liked the SEQ shifter in the default position, both in tension and in throw distance, the longer distance of the two choices. Now that you know all the details, let's go ahead and get out on track with the Oktane Designs SEQ Magnetic Sequential Shifter and talk about how it actually performs while driving. Actually, let me turn around real quick so you can see that cool Simpit logo on the other side. But out on track, the first thing you're going to notice is the heavy tension, the heavy amount of action you have to do to engage a shift on the SEQ shifter. And then the shifting happens very quickly on the shifter. It's a combination of that magnetic release and the tension that is resisting your move. When you get enough pressure moving forward or rearward, the moment that you have achieved enough pressure, the entire shift will be completed. There is no half shifts. There is no almost shift. It either released and shifted or you didn't move the shifter. On spring tension type shifters, I have had this issue with just enough movement prior to shifting and releasing it too soon, failing to shift. That just can't happen here. The SEQ shifter has an extreme amount of tactile, felt in the hand, and audible feedback heard with the ear as each shift provides a very firm clicking sound and vibration. This is also very reassuring to the driver as it confirms that the shift has indeed happened. In my case, I usually drive in headphones, and the game sounds will often drown out the exterior sounds that are happening around me. This click is loud enough to be heard in my headphones, and with the tactile effect, it hits that second sense at the same time. The SEQ shifter also has what I would describe as a high amount of tension. And this means the shifter itself is torture testing itself at a very high level. Shift after shift, the overall feeling of the shifter is smooth in its movement, but extremely strong in its firmness or rigidity. The 3D printed lever really has zero wiggle or flex, and the lower portion of the shifter is likely overbuilt for its task. At the top of the shifter is the Oktane Designs shifter knob or handle. It has an elongated round shape to it that is very, very smooth. Being made of plastic, it's not quite as cold to the touch as a metal handle, and you can tell that it is lighter weight and lighter density. But that didn't take away from its ability to get the job done. I will admit, I had concerns about 3D printed parts being used in such a significant area of the shifter. But I have been educated by Oktane Designs in that after really slamming on this thing, I now drive with total confidence. It seems as strong as the rest of the shifter, and it really did have a comfortable feel in my hand. I did drive the shifter on the lighter tension, but I really did prefer the heavy-duty feeling of the default and strongest setting. For those with chassis not quite as strong as my R seat, this might be a nice change to prevent your rig from actually flexing under the strength of this shifter. The SEQ shifter in its default position is a short throw shifter, and with the speed of the shifts, I was also happy with the default longer throw. But again, having the ability to make it even shorter will be nice for some drivers. In the end, the shifter performed really, really well. I didn't have a single missed shift in my entire time of testing, and that means better lap times. Oktane Designs has done a good job of building a good shifter for very hardcore sim racers. So that pretty much tells you everything you need to know about the Oktane Designs SEQ Magnetic Sequential Shifter. But just to make things perfectly clear like I like to do, let's go ahead and break it down with the good, the not so good, and the bottom line, starting off with the good, and that being it is a very stiff shifter. No flex. Big time click. Felt and heard. Heavy tension. Looks good. Adjustable tension. Adjustable throw. magnetic release, no half shifts. Easy to mount, compact design. And now on to the not so good. It is a little expensive. Plastic feeling knob. Non-changeable handle or knob. Extra electronics box. And now on to the bottom line. Going into this, I gotta tell you, I was definitely concerned about a 3D printed handle. And here's why. Anything that I've ever 3D printed came out way too rough and perhaps not even strong enough for something that I would sell to others to be used. But this handle was so smooth. I don't know what kind of material he's 3D printing with. I don't know what kind of finish work he's doing. He's obviously doing a lot of finish work to these pieces to give them the feeling. It's as nice as any molded piece that I've ever felt that it was also made of plastic. And in the end, I actually kind of like the comfort factor of the plastic in my hand, that warmer to the touch than a cold metal handle. And also when talking or considering the 3D printed parts of this, I was definitely concerned about that arm, the shifter arm as well, and its strength, especially when you consider the amount of tension it takes to shift. But I don't care what you do. I slammed on this thing, poor table. I slammed on this thing, I hammered on this thing, and after the amount of testing, it would have showed some signs of weakness. The way I tested it, I would call it a torture test, just to make sure. Since I had an area of concern, I slammed on it a little harder than I even would have on most shifters of this kind of tension. But again, at that high tension, it's constantly torture testing itself, and it never made any kind of sound or feeling that made me think it was going to be anything but solid for the rest of the life of the shifter. And I think as a result of those 3D printed parts, now I'm not sure this is the full reason why, but I think it's one of the reasons that it is such a loud shifter. It actually amplifies that clicking sound. It is by far one of the loudest shifters I've ever used. And if you have neighbors who don't like noise, you have roommates or loved ones who don't like your sim rig getting too loud, that could be a factor, especially in the higher tension position. It wasn't quite as loud in that lower, easier to click position, but it is a noisy and a very tactile shifter. But driving in headphones, that was actually a good thing for me and something I liked about the shifter. And this shifter is actually rather tall. Is that good? Is that bad? I think that really comes down to your application. I've seen some shifters that were only about this tall. I've seen some shifters that were this tall. I think it depends on your rig, how it's going to be mounted, and all of that stuff. So I wouldn't call it good or bad. The last thing I'm going to say or talk about is the fact that Oktane Designs is a newer company. They are a small company, and these are literally being handmade one at a time per order. That means about a 2 to 4 week lead time to get one. It also means there are certain advantages and disadvantages of a small operation like that. Advantages? Well, this is open source. If you want to use the wires from the buttons, or the switches inside here I should say, you can actually plug them into most button boxes that have extra slots and not even need the electronics box, which is one of the disadvantages. They don't have their own PCB. They have to resort to things like an extra electronics box in order to take that switch signal, convert it for your PC signal. So this is something that you kind of have to deal with on an operation like that, and I found a spot on my R seat to hide it. That was not really much of a problem. So if you want to check out this shifter, $249 on sale for the SEQ Magnetic Sequential Shifter, you can check it out at oktanedesigns.com with a K. So I hope you enjoyed this show. Be sure to give it a big thumbs up if you did. Be sure to subscribe so you can find out when our next review comes out. And if you want to help support the show, you want to be part of the team, check us out at patreon.com/thesimpit, where our supporters get early access to videos when they come out. They take part in the patron-only trophy races, and they get periodical gifts or giveaways from the Simpit only for our patron team. So check that out at patreon.com/thesimpit. Thanks again for watching. This is the Simpit. I'm Sean Cole, and I'll see you on the track. on.